My father's first words on entering Westminster Abbey yesterday were a pledge of service. It was a pledge to continue to serve, because for over 50
Camilla has reportedly transferred ownership of her private property at Ray Mill House in Wiltshire to her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez. This is a decision with straightforward estate planning logic behind it, but it also carries an implication that has not escaped those who follow these matters closely. If Camilla is divesting herself of her primary private residence, the property she owned independently before her marriage to Charles, and that represented her personal financial security outside the royal context, then the question of where she will live after Charles's reign ends becomes considerably more urgent. The answer to that question depends, to a degree that Camilla cannot be entirely comfortable with, on decisions that William will make. The broader context within which all this is unfolding is William's increasingly clear vision of what the monarchy needs to become and what it needs to leave behind. He and Catherine have reportedly settled on Forest Lodge and Windsor Great Park as their primary family residence, a decision that signals a deliberate break from the palace-centered model of royal life that previous generations have taken for granted. He is building a slimmer, more focused, more modern institutional model in which the royal family's public activities are concentrated among a smaller group of working royals and the sprawling network of peripheral royal associations and arrangements that accumulated across previous reigns is systematically reduced. In that model, there is limited space for the kind of expansive royal household that Camilla has maintained as queen consort, and even less space for the kind of assumptions about continued access and continued privilege that a former queen consort might otherwise expect to carry into the next reign. William is not, by the accounts of those who know him well, motivated by cruelty toward Camilla. He is motivated by a vision of the monarchy that is genuinely different from the one she has been part of, and by personal feelings about his father's well-being and his mother's legacy that give his vision a moral weight that he is not inclined to set aside out of diplomatic consideration for someone whose behavior has, in his view, repeatedly tested the limits of what he is prepared to tolerate. The question of Camilla's eventual title, when William becomes king, adds another dimension to a situation that is already genuinely complex. The constitutional reality is that Camilla will become Queen Dowager, a title that acknowledges her history as a queen consort while distinguishing her from the new queen consort, Catherine. She cannot be Queen Mother because that title applies only to the widow of a king who is also the mother of the reigning monarch, a description that does not fit Camilla's situation regardless of how long she was married to Charles or how significantly she contributed to his happiness in his reign. Whether William might choose an even less elevated designation, whether he might resist giving her the full Queen Dowager title and offer something that carries less institutional weight, is something that royal protocol experts have noted sits within the discretionary power of the incoming monarch in ways that give William genuine flexibility. His choice, when the moment arrives, will tell the world something important about how he views the chapter that is ending and the chapter he is beginning. It will tell the world something about what he believes his mother's story deserves in terms of institutional acknowledgement. And it will tell the world something about the kind of king he intends to be, not the tolerant and sometimes anguished figure caught between competing family loyalties that his public appearances occasionally suggest, but a man who has thought carefully and for a very long time about what the monarchy owes to the truth, and who intends to honor that debt in the decisions available to him. What is happening right now, in the quiet institutional corridors and the private estates, and the careful legal arrangements that constitute the real working machinery of the British monarchy, is something that will define the next chapter of that institution's history. William is not waiting. He is not preparing to wait. He is acting now, within the boundaries of what the current state of his authority permits, with a clear intention that when the boundaries expand, his direction will already be established and his priorities already visible to everyone who needs to understand them. Camilla's summer arrangements have been stopped. The estate where she planned to stay is not hers. The access she assumed was available to her as a matter of established right has been quietly but definitively withdrawn. The message delivered through that withdrawal is the kind of message that the royal family has always preferred to the alternatives, clear, unambiguous, delivered through action rather than words, and impossible to misinterpret by anyone who is paying attention. The estate, William has made clear in the only language that matters inside an institution as ancient and as protocol-conscious as the British monarchy, is his now. The authority is his. The decisions are his. And the future, whatever shape it takes for each of the people currently navigating the transition between one reign and the next, will be shaped by the vision, the values, and the memory of a man who grew up watching his mother fight for her dignity inside an institution that sometimes seemed determined to deny it to her, and who has no intention of allowing anything like that to happen again on his watch. Diana's son is ready. And the British monarchy, whether it is ready or not, is about to find out exactly what that means. If this story opened your eyes to how royal power truly shifts, share it with someone who follows the monarchy. The most important changes never happen on balconies. Subscribe for more in-depth royal analysis and leave your thoughts in the comments below. End of script word count, approximately 3,000 words. Making the image it created was one that William could neither overlook nor accept. Sources close to William describe his reaction in terms that go considerably beyond ordinary disapproval. He was, by the accounts of those aware of his private responses, genuinely and deeply angry. Not because he has ever had a simple or uncomplicated relationship with his stepmother, because he has not, and the history of that relationship includes feelings about his parents' marriage and its collapse that no amount of time has fully resolved. But because what he witnessed in the summer of 2025 appeared to him to represent something about Camilla's priorities and Camilla's judgment that had direct implications for how he would think about her position and her access to royal life in the future. A royal advisor, speaking carefully and without attribution, noted that William cares profoundly about his father's well-being and that watching Camilla behave in ways that appeared indifferent to that well-being was something that moved him from a position of cautious tolerance to something considerably less accommodating. The first visible sign that William was translating his private anger into institutional action came through a move that was small enough to be deniable as routine administration, but significant enough to be read clearly by everyone who understood its context. As Prince of Wales, William had inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, the vast and ancient estate that provides the heir to the throne with an independent financial base, and that comes with its own staff, its own administrative structure, and its own set of people whose employment depends on the duchy's management priorities. Among those people was Annabel Elliot, Queen Camilla's sister, who had worked as an interior designer on royal estate projects for approximately 2 decades, contributing her expertise to various properties across the duchy and the broader royal estate portfolio. William removed Annabel Elliot from the Duchy of Cornwall payroll. He did it without drama. He did it without public statement. He did it in the quiet, administrative way that changes of this kind are always made inside institutions whose communication strategy is built around the principle that the most consequential decisions are the ones that are never publicly announced. Annabel Elliot continues to work for King Charles and Camilla on their personal projects at the private royal estates. But her connection to the duchy, to the institution that William now controls, and that will form the financial and administrative core of his future reign, was severed. The message was understood immediately by those positioned to understand it. Loyalty to Camilla's family is not a form of currency that William accepts. Associations that existed because of the relationship between Annabel Elliot and her sister are not associations that automatically transfer to the next generation of royal leadership simply because they had always been there. Royal commentators who cover the internal dynamics of the palace with a kind of long-term perspective that separates genuine analysis from speculation noted that this move was significant not primarily for what it did but for what it indicated. It indicated that William was reviewing everything connected to the duchy with the eyes of a man who was not managing an inherited arrangement but building something new. And that in the process of building something new, connections whose primary justification was their usefulness to the previous management structure were going to be reconsidered without sentiment. Camilla's response to the accumulation of signals coming from William's direction has been reported through various channels, and the picture that emerges is one of a woman who is considerably less serene about her position than the polished composure of her public appearances might suggest. Reports from sources close to the palace describe Camilla pushing back through the one channel that remains available to her when she wants to influence outcomes that she cannot control directly. She has, by these accounts, been pressing King Charles to intervene, to speak to William, to slow down what she perceives as a deliberate campaign to diminish her position and reduce her access to the institutional resources and the physical spaces that she has come to regard as properly hers. The position this places Charles in is one of the most genuinely painful aspects of an already complicated situation. He is a father and a husband simultaneously, and the interests of his son and the interests of his wife are not currently aligned. He loves them both in the different and imperfect ways that complicated family histories permit. He knows William's history with Camilla, knows the depth of feeling that underlies it, and knows that the anger William is expressing now through institutional action rather than personal confrontation is rooted in emotional realities that go back to the most difficult years of William's adolescence. He also knows Camilla, knows what she has given up and endured to reach the position she now holds, and feels genuine loyalty and affection toward the woman who has been his companion through the most turbulent decades of his life. Royal expert Christopher Anderson, who has studied the internal dynamics of the Windsor family across many years and many crises, has noted that William's relationship with Camilla has always been characterized by a tolerance that is fundamentally different from acceptance. He tolerates her as his father's wife. He appreciates, from a distance and with genuine human feeling, that she makes his father happy and brings warmth and companionship to a man whose earlier years were marked by profound loneliness. But toleration and acceptance are different things. And the decisions William is making now, the quiet but unmistakable tightening of his grip on the institutional levers available to him, reflect the toleration rather than the acceptance. He will acknowledge Camilla's place in his father's life. He will not give her an unchallenged place in the life of his reign. The specific question of summer access to private royal properties sits at the center of. Prince William is doing exactly this right now. And nowhere is the evidence of that shaping more visible, more personal, or more charged with a complicated emotional history of the royal family than in what has just happened regarding Camilla's access to one of the most private and most significant properties connected to the crown's personal estates. William has moved to stop Camilla's planned private summer arrangements. The message delivered through the institutional channels that the royal family uses precisely because they allow maximum consequence with minimum public drama was unmistakable in its clarity. The estate, in every sense that matters for the future, belongs to William now. And William has decided who is welcome there and who is not. To understand why this moment matters as much as it does, you have to understand the architecture of royal property ownership, the specific legal mechanisms through which the late Queen Elizabeth II protected certain assets for the future, and the deeply personal dimensions of a conflict between a stepson and a stepmother that has been building quietly for years and has now reached a point where quiet is no longer the operating principle. The British royal family's relationship with its private properties is considerably more complicated than most outside observers realize. The distinction between properties that belong to the Crown estate and therefore to the institution rather than to any individual monarch, and properties that are genuinely privately owned by the monarch as a personal asset, is a distinction that carries enormous practical consequences when monarchs change. The Crown estate properties pass automatically with the Crown itself. The private properties do not. They belong to the individual who owns them and pass according to the terms of that individual's estate planning, which may or may not align with the expectations of people who have grown accustomed to using them. Queen Elizabeth II was not a monarch who left things to chance or to the assumptions of people who had not read the relevant documents carefully. She was, by the account of every constitutional expert and every royal observer who has studied her reign, a woman of extraordinary precision in matters of institutional management. She understood that the decisions made during a reign shape the possibilities available to those who come after, and she made her decisions accordingly. Among the most carefully considered of those decisions were the arrangements she put in place regarding certain private properties and assets that she wanted to ensure passed to William, rather than becoming subject to the kind of competing claims and institutional negotiations that the absence of explicit planning tends to produce. The mechanism through which she achieved this protection involved the kind of estate planning instruments that wealthy aristocratic families have used for generations to ensure that property passes to intended beneficiaries without the complications that intestacy or ambiguous documentation can create. Covenant trusts, established well in advance and structured with conditions that activate automatically when specified circumstances are in place, are precisely the kind of tool that prevents assets from becoming subject to dispute after the fact. Queen Elizabeth II, advised by solicitors who understood both royal law and aristocratic estate practice at the highest level, is understood to have employed exactly this kind of mechanism for certain properties she was determined to protect. The result was that when the conditions were met, when the late Queen had passed, and when William had assumed his position as heir with full senior royal responsibilities, certain custodial arrangements transferred to him automatically. Not through negotiation. Not through the kind of family discussion that might have allowed competing interests to assert themselves and demand consideration, but through the operation of legal instruments that had been structured specifically to prevent exactly that kind of interference. William became the custodian and effective controller of these properties not because he outmaneuvered anyone or because he was gifted them in some visible and publicly acknowledged gesture. He became their custodian because his grandmother had made sure, years before it became relevant, that this is what would happen. The specific trigger for the current confrontation over summer arrangements connects to a pattern of behavior that William has reportedly found increasingly difficult to accept in the period since his father's health challenges became serious. The summer of 2025 was, by multiple accounts from sources connected to the royal family, a turning point in how William views Camilla and what he intends to do about that view once the moment arrives when he has the full authority to act on it. King Charles spent the summer months of 2025 at Balmoral, The great Scottish estate that has been the royal family's summer retreat since Queen Victoria's husband